Welcome to Abide in Liberty, a podcast empowering patriots everywhere to re-enthrone faith, family, and freedom as the bedrock pillars of liberty in education, our communities, and our nation.
All right, everyone, welcome back for another episode of Abide in Liberty. Last week was all about the importance of becoming a righteous people if we're to wish and to have even a prayer of saving our country. Now, it's no accident that that topic came up during a month known as Pride Month. And what are we taking pride in? Well, in this country and around the world, we have decided to take an entire month to celebrate how thoroughly our cultures have spat all over God's laws of chastity. We see this on company banners, on company logos, across practically every social media platform that they have. We see this in flags raised above government buildings, even flags that displace the flag of the United States of America, or if they don't displace it, the flag for the United States of America takes a lower position than that of the pride flag. We're celebrating this month the extent to which our societies celebrate wickedness and call it good. Now, in matters of sexuality and procreation, the fact of the matter is that God himself, one of his main titles, the thing that we look to him and wonder at almost more than anything else, is his masterful handling of creative power. As we look up at the night sky and see the vastness of the universe and contemplate just how much is out there, we are overwhelmed and awed at the extent of God's creations. Creation is one of the things that make him God, and he has given a little bit of that power to humanity. The ability to create life, to partner with God in creating life. So it's no wonder that he cares very much how we use that little bit of creative power that he's given us. And it's no wonder that there are enormous consequences for individuals and societies for violating those sacred responsibilities. And most of the societal problems that we face are a direct result of our mismanagement of that procreative power, of this great gift to humanity. The pain, emotional and otherwise, that results from sexual abuse and assault, kids who grow up without both parents at home, and the crime and misery and drug abuse that results from that, sexually transmitted diseases, addiction to porn and other sexual addictions, the demeaning and objectification of women in all of its ugly forms, teenage pregnancy. All of this creates an environment rich for the seeds of human trafficking to flourish, not to mention child exploitation, which is just the sickest of the sick and the perversest of the perverse. The flood of spiritual sewage covering the land and seeping into practically every home stinks to high heaven. And we create a month to celebrate the demonic perversion of sacred creative powers. Now, those who experience attractions and feelings outside of the appropriate use of procreative power that God has prescribed might say, but this is just who I am. This is the body that I was born into. And unfortunately, this is yet another of Satan's great lies. He wants you, and he wants everyone to believe that they are nothing more than their urges and their passions. But we are so much more than that. We, each one of us, are eternal in nature with infinite potential. These passions and urges don't define who we are, but our management of them is what defines who we are and what unlocks the potential for godlike growth. Another common theme that we hear during this month, and I came across this just yesterday, actually, as I was sitting on a video conference call with a lady who was introducing me to the features of a new accounting software that our school is considering transitioning over to. Now, I don't know what in the world Pride Month has to do with accounting software or how that's relevant to our conversation, but in her background, she had a Pride logo that had this caption underneath: choose love always. Now, first of all, another problem that we've seen in our society is that love has been equated with these sexual urges, with these sexual proclivities. And unfortunately, what that does is simply demeans love, because what we're talking about most of the time, and when love is expressed in media and in entertainment and in movies, you love someone, then what follows is the use of those procreative powers, because that apparently is the sum total of what it means to love somebody. And that, unfortunately, is a gross devaluation of what real love is. Love is not the same as lust. It's not the same thing at all. I mean, you would think, based on what our society is saying, that the ultimate pinnacle of human achievement is to feel comfortable in acting out your wildest fantasies, no matter how perverse or how against God's law they are. What a sad, small definition of love. And in response to you can't help who you love, yes, you can, actually. Love is service and self-sacrifice. It's putting another's needs above your own, and you have complete control over that. You may not be able to help who you are naturally drawn to, but you are in control of your thoughts and what you do with those urges. We are put here on earth to bridle our passions and subsume our will to God's, to overcome the natural man and the natural wicked inclinations in all of us. We're not here to give in to them. We're not here to discover how wide-ranging our appetites and passions can travel, or the breadth that they can encompass. We're here to bridle our passions, to put them under control, to exercise dominion over these bodies that we've been given, and not allow ourselves to become slaves to them. That's not freedom. And the reason why we're here to overcome the natural man is not because God is some evil overlord who puts us here to try and tempt us with these terrible, strong urges and see if we're going to fall flat on our faces. It's not because he wants to see just how far he can push the obedience of his mindless subjects, but it's because we trust that he sees and knows more than we do. This is much like my children. They, if given their own free reign over their appetites and passions with regards to food, would do nothing but eat candy and ice cream and soda all day long. And before long, and also they probably wouldn't brush their teeth as a result of that. So before long, they'd be 500 pounds with teeth rotting out of their faces. They'd be miserable, sick, and not last very long. Their lifespan would not be nearly as fulfilling or long, and their abilities would be severely hampered as they give in to their basest urges, no matter how little they make sense. And so as adults, the idea is here that we've learned something since childhood, that we aren't these children that are just subject to our desires and reactive to everything that we think and feel. We're able to stop and think and recognize that this being who has created everything that we see must have a higher viewpoint, a higher perspective than we do, might actually know something about how best to achieve happiness. So when he gives us commandments to bridle our passions and to begin to exercise some control over those urges and impulses, we do so not because we're terrified of some arbitrary punishment that an evil overlord has just made up out of nowhere, but because we trust that perhaps this God of the universe, this God of natural law, knows something about the life we should live if we wish to align ourselves with natural law and achieve happiness. We acknowledge that we don't see the whole picture. And so we trust that maybe he does, and he knows more than us. And if we throw our hands up and say, no, my way, the way I feel is right, and God should bend the knee to my will, we are as ignorant and immature as a 3-year-old who looks at a parent and says, I'm the one who understands my dietary requirements better than you. We might want to eat spiritual junk food all the time. And even as an adult, I want to eat actual junk food all the time. But we choose a healthier diet, both physically, hopefully anyways, and spiritually because of trust. And this kind of comes back to the idea of commandments overall. I probably no one here is stranger to the experience where someone looks at you who maybe knows a little bit about your faith and what that faith requires of you and says, man, I can never do that. That's way too restrictive, right? You're taking all the fun out of life. And unfortunately, that's a very limited view also. I had the privilege of teaching our middle high school class a couple of years ago. And at that time, we were studying astronomy. And I love the parallel, the curriculum we were using drew between the law of gravitation and God's commandments. So we just finished learning about how the Earth is subject to orbits based on the law of gravitation. The Earth kind of follows this elliptical orbit around the sun. But then we also learned about the Goldilocks zone, which is this narrow band in this vast solar system that can support life. And not only support it, but allow it to thrive. And the Earth just so happens to be located in that perfect spot. And what keeps it there? That tether, that anchor of gravitation. Now, if the Earth woke up one day and decided, I'm done with this. This tether are chains. They're restrictive. It's preventing me from achieving my potential. Well, if it somehow could find a way to untether itself from the law of gravitation, it wouldn't take long before it was a floating, aimless chunk of ice with no purpose, no direction, and nothing alive in it. And God's commandments serve that exact same purpose. They don't shackle us to the arbitrary whims of a supreme universal dictator. That God is a loving Heavenly Father, and He knows that if we follow those run rules that He's laid out for us, it will keep us in the Goldilocks zone. It'll keep us in that place where we can achieve our greatest potential. And that is no more evident and no more true than in the law of chastity. It is not restrictive. Succumbing to every urge leads to some of the greatest miseries and addictions that are known to mankind. Now, for those who are dealing with same-gender attraction or for any of these other difficulties, am I saying that it's evil to have those urges? Of course not. Of course not. As human beings, we all are going to be tested to our max. There's going to be something or many things that test our resolve to follow God's commandments. For many of us, it's the law of chastity. For others, it could be drugs. It could be other forms of addiction. It could be anger. It could be, there's a whole host of things. Paul talks about having a thorn in his side, and he never clues us in to what that is, but we all are going to have that thorn that just grates, that pokes and festers and just drives us nuts. And not only does it drive us nuts, it drives us to our knees to seek out heavenly help to deal with it. I have such a thorn. You have such a thorn. And just because yours is different from mine doesn't make you evil. But what counts is how we react to it. Do we allow it to drive ourselves to our knees, or do we allow it to stiffen our necks and stare at the heavens in defiance and shake our fists and say, why did you make me this way? Or you did this to me, so I have to give in. And by the way, God's not asking us to do anything that He didn't ask His beloved Son, His firstborn Christ, to do. Christ did not want to suffer and die the way that He did. He was no masochist. This wasn't a pleasant thing for him. Him succumbing to the atonement, allowing himself to be crucified on the cross, was not him giving into his urges and his own desires for himself. It was quite the opposite, but he did it because he knew and trusted that God knew better and would more than compensate for the pain that he was experiencing. Talk about a thorn in your side. He literally had thorns placed on his head and driven through his hands and his wrist and his feet. That was not comfortable. Not a thing in his life was comfortable. As he wandered around homeless, being persecuted from village to village, spat on, derided, driven out of his hometown and everyone that he knew and loved from his childhood. This was not the act of somebody who was just going about responding to what he wanted. He subverted what his physical body must have been screaming at him on the cross, which was get down, get away, stop the pain. And he sacrificed his whole being to allow us to receive heavenly help in our struggles, to allow us to be forgiven. What he did was love. That is what love is. Giving into his passions and limiting not only his growth, but those that he was responsible for blessing would not have been love. That would have been an act of supreme selfishness. And it's no different for you and I. Now, we may not be asked to carry the cross that he did, but we all have a cross to carry. And it's going to be hard. It's going to be really hard. But with his help, we can get through it. Even something as difficult as same-sex attraction or gender dysphoria or any of these other things that we are celebrating giving into. Another common misconception and lie is that agreement means love. In other words, in order to love somebody, we have to agree with their life choices. You know, it is possible for me to think that what you are doing will not bring you happiness, will not bring you the greatest peace and fulfillment, and I can love you at the same time. In fact, I care about what you are doing and the misery that you're driving yourself towards precisely because I love you and know that your search for happiness in the next sexual indulgence will never satisfy. I've seen that kind of indulgence rip families apart, decimate marital vows, and pulverize the souls of the kids caught in the crosshairs. Ignoring the truth, ignoring eternal truth is not love. For those of us who are tempted to just say, well, you do your life and let me live mine. If you feel that's good for you, it's good for you. Fine, sure. Maybe God isn't for everybody. Maybe the law of chastity isn't for everyone. Anyone that succumbs to that kind of thinking, to thinking that there's a law of morality for some that doesn't apply to others and vice versa, what we're really doing is escaping the discomfort of having a tough conversation and of possibly somebody not liking what we have to say, but ignoring truth is not love. It is selfishness. We're avoiding pain ourselves by doing that. And it's not going to help anybody become any happier. So I want to end this week's episode with my affirmation of what I know to be true as it relates to family and to human sexuality. Marriage, and I'm talking about the eternal version, not the redefined version that our governments have come up with, which, by the way, marriage was instituted by God. He's the one who married Adam and Eve. It's kind of his invention. He holds the patent and he gets to decide what the real definition is. And marriage is between a man and a woman, period, full stop. Gender is a part of our eternal identity. Nobody was born in the wrong body, and you can't change that eternal gender identity that God assigned to you with fancy surgeries and drugs any more than you can change yourself from a human being to a fish. When we keep our desires, our appetites, and our passions within the bounds the Lord has set, we can achieve our greatest potential and find who we really are, our true selves. That's the way that you do the real you, the one that the master of the universe wants to help you achieve. And it's really that simple. We don't have to complicate it. Complication, it's interesting. If anyone's ever heard of Occam's razor, it's a scientific principle that says the simplest explanation is the true one. And we believe that as a scientific principle. And it's true in spiritual matters as well. It really is very simple. There are a few areas in our society that need the light of truth shined more than in matters of chastity, because the erosion of chastity is a direct assault on families, on the fabric of society, and on freedom itself. Immorality is how we get broken homes and a people who are completely incapable of governing themselves in a free society, a people who behave as little more than animals, constantly reacting to the stimulus and urges of the moment. If we want maximum freedom in this country, we need a society of people disciplined in self-governance, in mastering the self. And that can only come through virtuous, chaste living in accordance with God's law of sacred creation.
Thank you for listening to Abide in Liberty. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes, and share this with friends and family. In the meantime, keep up with the show online at abideinliberty.com. Also, if you'd like to help our K-12 bless and educate more families, contact us by visiting libertyyouthacademy.org. Until next time, be on the alert, stand firm in the faith, and be strong.